Hello, you daring souls. Once again, you have found the Mixed Up Mystics podcast. We're so thrilled you're here. Today's conversation is entitled The Jesus of Our Own Design. I feel like we should listen to Depeche Mode's Personal Jesus at this point, but we can't afford that. If you listen long enough, you will hear this conversation.
You know, like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know you were into pickleball. Sorry, I'm just joking. I've never played pickleball.
We're the only two white Americans who've ever played pickleball.
Why are we not pickleballing? I don't understand. Everyone's into the pickleball.
We're glad you're here. Sit back and join the conversation.
This podcast is a presentation of Pioneer Dream, celebrating 30 years of moving stories for our corporate, nonprofit, and entertainment partners. We invite you, fellow misfits, to join the conversation with text, emails, or just messages in the comment section below. As always, you can share this podcast with anyone you think would get it by sending the link now. Thanks for listening.
Well, once again, you have tuned in to the Mixed Up Mystics podcast.
That's us.
We're so grateful that you're listening and you're with us now. And we literally envision your faces as we have these conversations. And so it's a lot of fun that way. So
yes.
Welcome.
I mean, not everyone's. That would be a lot of visualization.
You know the ones we're not looking at, so that's fine. I won't make eye contact with you guys.
Yes, I like that. Have you noticed totally off topic.
Okay.
Kind of a fashion trend. So like for those of us who grew up in the 80s and 90s, like the puffy shoulders on things, like I wouldn't say shoulder pads, but there's like sort of, little fluffy kind of in the seams on the shoulders.
Do I have to go back to double layered Izod shirts now?
I mean, I wish you would.
Oh,
it was a good look. But no, your sweater that you're wearing today, for those of you who can't see, which is everyone but me, kind of has those little, like the shoulders are a little fluffy. It's not a girl's sweater.
That's just muscle, buddy. Puffy shoulders.
Anyway, I had to get it out or it was going to be a distraction.
All right.
So anyway, you look nice. I didn't mean to make you feel bad.
I hope that you guys can hear the difference also in the podcast because we have moved into a new studio setting, which you cannot see, but it has all kinds of sound foam core. Mm-hmm. It has a little nook over here on one side.
And you've got like some
drinks and stuff.
You've got cool lights.
Yeah.
And then there's like a diffuser in here with like some good smelling stuff.
It's got a fragrance. It's kind of a unisex smell, but I think it ventures more towards the masculine.
Really?
Which I
would
appreciate.
Say it's fresh. It's a fresh smell.
This is
like
not,
your shoulders.
That's not what you called. Yeah, that's not what you called. So let's talk about the things we kind of started this conversation a while back or a couple of days ago, and I made this what I feel like was kind of an observation, and I'm sure many other people have had this observation.
Okay. Hit me.
In this current cultural scenario where we find ourselves in America as well as in the Bible Belt, you find an awful lot of people quoting Jesus, and in our case, putting words in Jesus's mouth. And it's funny because if you didn't know who Jesus was and you were just reading all this stuff, you would say that Jesus is schizophrenic because one moment he is doing this and he's incredibly mean and he's got teeth and, all that kind of stuff. And on this other side, he's incredibly gentle.
Based on what people
if you're just reading
post or
if you're just reading threads online, you think, who
like,
is this Jesus and why can't he make up his mind who he is?
I'm so confused right now.
And so it led me to this, I guess, awareness or observation that, many of us have our own picture of who Jesus is, our own version of Jesus, and we're fairly convinced that our version is the most accurate. And so I just thought, well, that's really significant because we believe that we're all doing the work of Jesus, that we're representing Jesus, but who that Jesus is vastly different depending on who you are.
Right.
So, for example, I'll give you some examples. There's, of course, there's the end time Jesus.
Oh,
He's pretty obsessed with
apocalypse. Sure.
Post-trib and pre-trib and all this kind of stuff and getting ready for the tribulations and all that kind of stuff. It's constantly an awareness of moving countries and end time stuff. There's the buff warrior Jesus that is always
Which one
like
is that?
That's the one that's always like on the white
like that does
stallion.
CrossFit or something or what?
Yeah, I mean, it looks like he does, but he's always got the sword and he's on the side of righteousness and justice,
righteous
and
indignation.
slaying, he's the one
Spiritual
slaying
warfare
evil
Jesus,
and evildoers, and he's really all about the righteous.
Yeah.
And,
Okay. Gotcha.
There's, of course, there's Jesus the healer.
Yeah.
There's
I like that one.
Jesus the prosperous, who apparently lives to bless us and to promote us and to make us prosperous.
Okay. Yeah. Jesus the prosperous.
Yeah,
I bet
there's,
a lot of people sign on for that one.
Well, in our area of the country, it's a big one. It will sell tickets.
We have not found that to be true, but
I've tried to plug in that equation. It doesn't really work for me.
Right.
There's Jesus the born again, who's pretty much just obsessed with closing the deal.
Yeah.
Signing people up.
The evangelistic Jesus.
Right. By any means necessary.
Yeah.
Let's get people to sign on the dotted line.
Yeah.
There's Jesus the gentle. So he's the one that's always with the little children.
Yeah.
Sometimes our inner child.
Yeah.
He's usually with lots of little lambs.
Yes.
And stuff like that. You see him
I
in a
find that one comforting.
You see him in
I
a
like a
gentle
good
robe
lamb.
sitting on a rock, and there's kids and rainbows and things
That's
around
a
him.
sweet one.
Not the gay rainbows, because we know Jesus isn't gay, but
Stop. Is there a rainbow Jesus?
oh yeah, there
Good.
is.
I love it. I like it all.
I like that Jesus. And so there's Jesus the scorekeeper. So he's the one that walks around. He watches us with
Taskmaster.
the clipboard, and he kind of keeps track of everything we do, and he makes the
Okay.
list of check marks when we get things right and check marks when we get things. And he usually has this kind of look of disapproval, because we always get
right.
more things wrong than we get things right.
Oh,
So,
right. Well, and even
scorekeeper.
beyond our actions, he's looking into the motivations behind them. So that's intense.
Exactly.
So you're going to need 2 clipboards for me.
I don't know. I don't know where to get a clipboard.
One with the actions and one with the why.
There's also the grace Jesus, who really doesn't, he didn't require anything from us. Everything goes, everything's good.
Okay.
Kind of looks like he might be a grape farmer in California.
Yeah,
He's
like if
super chill.
If the dude had a Jesus, it might be the grace Jesus. Like, all right.
So I find that whole thing really interesting, because, I mean, obviously, what's a challenge in all that is the huge swath of variety between presumably your Jesus and my Jesus, or their Jesus and our Jesus. And we're all shouting in the name of Jesus, but who that Jesus is radically different. Yeah. And so, it makes me wonder, how do we land or select, usually subconsciously, our Jesus? And how do we get to that place? How do we get to that person that is our Jesus?
That is interesting. And it's also interesting because when we have a Jesus in mind, and you mentioned several types, but it can also be a combo.
Yes.
Is what I'm thinking, right?
Well, and it can be in a moment,
we'll take
Jesus
that.
too,
Yeah,
right?
definitely. But if you're trying to look at Jesus in the Bible, there are different moments that you could find to support which Jesus you have in your mind, based on, if he's the righteous indignation Jesus, it's Jesus turning over the tables in the tabernacle.
Yes.
If it's the little lamb Jesus, it's when he says, come unto me. And Jesus can be all those things.
Yes.
But how we get to that, I think a lot of it has to do, maybe not all of it, but a lot of it has to do with the initial pictures that we had, maybe when we were growing up, or like that system of faith that we grew up in. And then later on, I think maybe based on our own struggles or our own political ideologies or the way we view the world, we can start to wedge him,
or maybe even our
a little
own
bit more into the mold.
Needs in a moment or something like that. Yeah, it is interesting because, I think you can find each of those Jesuses, Jesusi, Jesus.
Are you like plural, like octopuses?
Pluralizing Jesus.
Octopi, Jesusi.
The Jesusi. You can find all the Jesusi in the gospel. I mean, like you say, there's the righteous Jesus turning over the tables. There's the healer Jesus. There's the compassionate, merciful Jesus standing between a woman and being stoned. There's the Jesus of grace, and there's the Jesus that welcomes little children. I can't really find the prosperous Jesus, though. I'm sure maybe he's in there. I just can't find him.
Oh, it's literally not in there.
Whoa, I see.
Yeah.
That's why I can't find it.
That is not in there.
Yeah, and there's probably even some relationship, like you said, it's kind of the Jesus that's presented to us when we first become aware of him, what that Jesus looks like and how that stays with us. And so, for a lot of us, that Jesus crosses over into how we see our parents or how we saw our dads, especially.
Yeah.
And that kind of translates into how we see God, and sometimes even how we see Jesus in that same conversation. So I think you're so right. And then there's the Jesus that probably gets shaped by our culture around us, especially in our current political and moral views.
Yeah, sure.
So that Jesus has to reinforce and go with our political schematic.
Yeah.
And right now, that political schematic is about prosperity.
Yeah.
It's about cutting off evil.
Yeah.
It's about
righteous,
segregating ourselves in righteousness.
Separation,
Yeah.
righteous separation.
And so,
right. Which is weird because that's how I grew up.
Yes.
Not in my
that's
personal
what
family, but in the larger.
That's what fundamentalism gave us. Which
in the
was
80s and 90s. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh,
right.
we're back, but it's worse.
Yeah, exactly. And so then, so not only do we need to, and I think you and I are cut to this phrase the day of the Jesus of our own design. Mm-hmm. We've been making God in our own image for a long time, and so now we're putting words in Jesus's mouth. We're putting intention behind Jesus as a mascot and saying, "This is our mascot now. This Jesus represents us and not you."
Yeah,
and because of that, we have to kind of warp and twist and manipulate the gospel into supporting our political campaign, our political view, our worldview,
sure,
how we see people. And so if we don't want to be bothered by things and we don't want to be on some road to change, then we can say, oh, my Jesus is this Jesus of grace, and he's not requiring of me, and don't judge me because I'm under grace, man.
Yeah.
So don't screw with me. I'm
right,
fine.
Man. This will not abide, dude.
This will not abide, dude.
This will not abide.
And if you're on the other side, you might harbor a Jesus where it's about fear and using fear to motivate people into action, motivate people into doing things. So it's either the fear of hell, or it's the fear of losing our country, or it's the fear that that says that God really does love America and Americans more, and so that's where all the priorities and values should be.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me is that we're not content to just have our own picture of Jesus. A lot of times we want to force that on everyone else around us.
Exactly right.
So, if you want to have the dude Jesus or the righteous Jesus, I'd be like, well, I may not agree with that, but okay, I'm trying to be. But so often we think, no, this is the way.
Yeah.
And you will need to see it this way.
Well,
and then we go out after that.
Isn't that our reason for online proselytizing of our view for other people? We're trying to convince people that our view of Jesus is accurate. So we make quotes about, from Jesus that we kind of hand cherry pick from the Gospels or from scriptures or whatever. And we say, well, God says and Jesus says, and that's why you need to vote yes for proposition, whatever. And that's why you got to vote for my candidate. And that's why we're turning away immigrants. And that's why we're, so we're quoting Jesus, and we're capitalizing on his authority as a person and as a deity. We're capitalizing on that to give authority to what we already believe and what we are pushing.
I think online especially, people are fishing for support of their own image of Jesus.
Yes.
So you can throw something like that out, and then you have a bunch of people hop on, yeah, man, that's right. Amen. Preach it, brother, or whatever, whichever one. And we're looking for support. And then when you have that, then you can start. And I think it's just, I don't know if it's justification so much. It's justification, but it's also just reinforcing that, hey, this is what I'm doing is right. So at the root of it, my guess is I'm okay. Yes. I'm okay. This is what I believe. And look at all these people who amen, preached it, and gave it a thumbs up. So my guess right.
It's a huge hit, for our egos to have all those people agree with us. Maybe one of the many things that makes this so complicated and makes it troubling is that it does confuse a lot of people. When you twist and change and say, this is Jesus, no, this is Jesus, no, this is Jesus. For the other people, it's kind of like, well, which one? And it does make us look hypocritical, and it does make us look, here we are in a faith that is built on unity. It's just built on this one thing, and yet we cannot unify to save our lives or our country.
Yeah.
And so that part is really disheartening. And then also, the fact that we would do things in the name of Jesus which have no place in Jesus whatsoever. So the meanness or the ugliness or any of those things, and I think that's, speaking of when you see Jesus come into the temple and all that kind of stuff, I think that's part of it. Here you are doing these things in the name of my dad, in the name of my father, and you are completely misrepresenting them. And when you see Jesus at his angriest,
that was
it's the religious. He's not mad at the common citizenry. He's mad at the preachers, about the religious leaders, because you are lying about who my father is. You are misrepresenting them. Yeah. And you are getting in the way of him having a relationship with people based on that lie. Because who would want to be with somebody who is tying heavy loads on people and, making them feel bad about themselves?
I think that's the biggest danger of it, is when Jesus gets misrepresented. And we've all done that at times, I'm sure. You see people and they would say, well, if that's Jesus, I don't want anything to do with him. And that's sad. I mean, here we are theoretically supposed to be lights in the world of hope and love. And instead, people are like, well, I don't want to be like that at all. I don't want that. And so I feel like there are so many people that have probably understandably said no to Jesus based on what they've seen demonstrated, or those images that other people have of him. And that's so sad. Right. And I feel like with the way Jesus is represented, especially as of late, I've found myself in a couple of instances in conversation with people saying, that's not what I believe it's like. Right. Almost having to, we, neither you nor I like conflict, and we want to be chill, for the most part with everything. But I've had to stand up for my friend a couple times and say, I don't understand how people represent him, because that's not the God that I know. Yeah. Well, and it's freeing for people to hear that.
It's difficult for you and I to have this conversation publicly. One, because...
Yet we're doing it.
Yes, here we are. One, because we have seen kind of the caricature version of Christianity, which has become the culture of Christianity in America in a lot of ways. And we have not wanted to be identified with that. So we have, we keep acting like that's not our family. And they keep acting like we're not the family either.
That's why we waited so long to even do the podcast.
Also, I think also it's like, it's a scary place to be putting words in the mouth of Jesus. It's a scary, I mean, if you want to talk about the fear of God, I think that's it. Yeah. It's not, it's not always the damnation stuff, but it's when you are in some way or form representing this person, and then you begin to manipulate or change those words for your own purposes or good or ideology. That is a scary thing. And maybe if just, I feel like that's a place of difficult accountability. That at some point when you are manipulating those words and you are, trying to move Jesus's mouth like a puppet to say these things, and you're misrepresenting him, I just do not want to be in those shoes. Because that's a scary place to me.
Well, and how can people be so confident? I mean, to me, the truth is, that's what faith is we don't know. I mean, we don't know. And none of us have proof of any of these things. It's those things that speak to us in our heart. And so in some ways, I admire the confidence, this is the way it is, and da-da-da-da-da-da. It's not going to help anybody else. And you're going to, just find supporters for your campaign. But the truth is, if you ever find yourself in a conversation like that, and you and I have, I'm not afraid to say, I don't know. I mean, that doesn't add up for me. Right. In my personal experience, like all we can do, right, is tell our own story. I have found Jesus to be this way, a constant friend, a companion. And I don't know where other people are getting that. And I think that's one of the phrases I like from the Bible, which is pretty interesting, is when it talks about working out your own salvation. And I'm sure with
fear and trembling.
With fear and trembling. And that's the fear. That's it. I forgot the second part. That's it. That's the fear and trembling. am I so brazen that I feel confident in exactly my perspective that I'm going to go out and tell people this is exactly how you get to heaven.
Right.
This is the way you do it. I mean, good God, I'm not that confident about where I want to go to lunch. And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like fear and trembling. That's the thing.
That's a reverence. That's a respect.
Fear and trembling is the, God, I don't know. This is the way that I feel you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how I've experienced you.
Yeah.
And all I can do, all I would want to do is share that with other people if they ask.
Yeah. Right.
They have NADS. The other people have got the NADS, I guess. Sorry, I haven't used that word in a while. NADS. It goes back to like science. I don't know. But anyway, but the point is I don't know. What do you feel? Do you have people ask you, like, if you've had some conversations?
I feel like people have an assumption of probably based on, my view of Jesus. They probably assume a certain thing based on, my inability to go on with certain radical political views.
Yeah.
That I believe are radical political views.
Yes, I believe
and
that
so,
too. So they think if you're not this, then you must be that.
And maybe your Jesus is wishy-washy, or maybe your Jesus is not hard
holding
on crime.
Up the morals, right?
Not hard on crime. I don't know.
McGruff, the crime dog. Jesus, the crime dog.
I just haven't. I think it comes down to a couple of things. One, when I think about it, and we've talked about this concept before, my relationship with Jesus and my relationship with God is really this threefold thing. There are the scriptures, that we read, and that gives a lot of context and a lot of insight and a lot of understanding. But there's a lot to those scriptures too, between historical context and translations and all that stuff. But the scriptures are, in my view, really, really important. There's also the community of believers that we are a part of. Right. So I'm not on my own, because everything seems brilliant and makes sense to me when I'm on my own. But in a community, you have context and you get other views and you get other feedback. And so I find that community is incredibly important on that. And then I have this personal, semi-experiential relationship with Jesus, which is, I think, praying and conversation and meditation and being with this human. I need all three of those. And all three of those have shaped my picture or composite of who Jesus is. Yeah. Not one of them stands on their own. Okay. And just one of them would be dangerous. Just the feely thing without scriptures and community, that's a dangerous place to be. Right. Scriptures alone, well, there's a lot of interpretation in scriptures. And so without the person of Jesus and without the community of Jesus, I miss some of that. So I find all that is really, really, really integral. And then I've also found, especially in the last, couple of years, where we go into this with fear and trembling, is this prayer of saying, okay, I'm looking for you, Jesus, and I don't need you to be the Jesus I want you to be, or the Jesus I need you to be or think you are. I need to find you. Yeah. And so it's an odd relationship to have with your spiritual practice or with your faith or whatever, to, in one way, hold on to it dearly, but in another way, hold on to it with such a light touch that it has the freedom to grow and be closer to what is accurate than it is right now. Yeah. So, what I believed 10 years ago was like being in kindergarten. And so that's what that was 20 years ago or whatever. I had that understanding. Well, now here I am in 12th grade. And that thing has evolved, and the depth of it has gone deeper. And where I am now in 12th grade is different than where I was in kindergarten. Yeah, so
it's a richer relationship.
I want to hold on to that spiritual experience with enough freedom that it can change, that it can evolve, that it can grow and not be just what it was 6 years ago.
Well, it's like, if you have a friend that has been a lifelong friend and, maybe they're into a certain kind of music or they like this kind of books or, so you sort of know them this way, but as they maybe potentially evolve as a person and start liking this kind of music as well and or these kind of books, you're not going to say, no, I don't want you anymore. Right. I don't want that. Yes. You're going to, because you know who that person really is to you, you're going to be open. Yeah. And I think that so much of it is, we kind of can come at things two ways. So we talk about this, which I like, either gripping onto it tightly to keep it a certain way, or opening our hands and heart and saying, okay, I've known you all my life, but I'm open to considering that maybe this is also one of your attributes.
Right.
I'm open to understanding that, perhaps based on the times or what's happening in the world right now, that I'm seeing additional parts of you.
Right.
And that to me makes that relationship and that friendship exciting, just like it would with a person. You know, like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know you were into pickleball. Sorry, I'm just joking. I've never played pickleball.
We're the only two white Americans who've never played.
I know, especially in our age group. I mean, why are we not pickleballing? I don't understand. Everyone's into the pickleball. But yeah, to me, the person of Jesus, since I was very young, at its root, has been a safe place for me. Mm-hmm. My place of safety, my love divine, that beautiful, sweet okayness.
Yeah.
So that core does not change, but me being open to additional things to that is okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I'm not throwing everything out because I say, oh, maybe Jesus is open to that, or does, that type of thing.
Right.
And I'm certainly not going to force that.
Right.
My impression of that on someone else. And what is your image of Jesus at its very little core?
Well, it's funny because I feel like my vision of Jesus, or picture of Jesus, is actually shaped by all the three things we talked about. So if I had to be limited to like one passage or one piece or chapter or whatever of the Bible, it would probably be something from John's gospel, and it would probably be in those chapters, 13, 14, 15, where it's kind of Last Supper thing, and he's getting ready to leave the, earth. And there's such, especially in the Gospel of John, there's such incredible intimacy.
Yeah.
And this is where he is sitting with them at the table and he's saying, look, I'm leaving. I'm going to go to heaven to prepare a place for you. And then he has this incredibly intimate moment where he says, it's essentially, hey, we've been together pretty much nonstop for the last 3 years. And we've laid in the grass in the night under the moon and had all these conversations. And so we've talked about everything there is to talk about. And so here I am, I'm leaving, and you're sad, and I get it. I'm going to prepare a place for us. And then he says, if it were not so, don't you think I would have told you? In other words, we're so close. Yeah. We're such best friends. I call you friends. So if these things were not true, don't you think I would have told you? Because everything I've seen from the Father, I've told you. So that intimacy means a great deal to me.
Deep friendship.
And so, within that passage is Jesus saying, I am the vine and you are the branches. And remain in me, and I will remain in you. And there's such intimacy to that, and promise to that, and gentleness that really shapes that.
Right.
When I am with other humans, and then I feel inside of me the love of Jesus bubbling up for that person.
Oh, yeah.
That is overwhelming to me, and it means so much to me. And I feel his values being expressed so that I can see who he is. So part of who he is, what he's trying to reveal to me is, this is who I am. Feel my love for this person.
Right.
And that, I was such an idiot, even when I worked in the bar, and I would meet all these wonderful people and stuff like that. There were a handful of times when I would have to, can't believe I'm telling the story, where I'd have to go to the bathroom because I would break down crying over the sadness and sorrow and pain for this person. Yeah. And that's not just my pain. That's not just my empathy. That is the sadness of a dad for his son or daughter. Yeah. And he is grieving that this person is in so much pain, And then, then on the touchy-feely personal side of that, with my relationship with Jesus, that has been my experience with him, that he loves me feel him, I hear him. And so the intimacy of that's where that composite of who he is comes from. So it's not just one thing or another, one expression of that. So I think of him as very loving. Mm-hmm. I think of him as much more understanding of the human plight than probably we give him, credit for that. And I've had to overcome a whole lot of the scorekeeper mentality, in my lifetime, but I think I'm closer to that. What about you?
It's the sense, for me, it's the sense of truly being known, that there's someone who created you a special way and understands who you are and the particular struggles that you have and why in any given day this or that might be tough. There's a passage in the Old Testament that makes me sound pretty spiritual, so I'm feeling pretty good about it. But it's actually it's after Abraham and Sarah. If you guys grew up in the Christian tradition, you might know the story. Father Abraham. The
one that had many sons.
Yes, and many sons. Father Abraham. But anyway, God comes to Abraham and he says, "You're going to be the father of many nations, man." Mm-hmm. He's like, "This is going to be amazing. And I'm going to give you a son." And they're, in the story, he's like 100 and his wife's, trailing behind to 80.
She's a little older than us.
Yeah. I mean, she's postmenopausal for sure. I don't think you thought you'd hear that today.
Wow.
But Sarah, and so it's really hard to believe. And so in the meantime, while they're waiting, and man, have we been there in our life many times, waiting on, you feel like you get this picture of how something's going to unfold, but it's taken a really long time. Right. And so in the meantime, you're like, well, we could do this. You want to do this? Yeah, let's do this. We'll kind of help God along, kind of a deal. And so, Abraham in the story decides to have relations, as they would say, with one of his handmaidens.
Sexing it up, you're saying.
Okay, stop. That's gross. Anyway, it was Hagar, what's her name? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so Sarah agrees to it. The wife says, okay. And then she ends up
I think it was actually Sarah's idea.
Oh, yeah.
Sarah got tired of waiting on God. She said, hey, let's help things along.
That's right. You're right. Sarah's idea. Yeah. And then Abraham was like, are you saying that you want me?
If I had $1 for every time you told me to have sex with somebody else.
Wow. Stop. No, but I mean.
I feel like that would have been the suggestion for me. I believe God, but what I think what might help here.
I know. But the funny thing,
I don't want to do this.
He was like, you surprised. He was like, you want me to, okay. I mean, okay.
I wonder how long that conversation was.
No, we'll do. Okay. All right. If I have to. I mean, I would never want to, but okay. Anyway, younger woman. Sorry. But anyway, anyway, long story short, the baby's born. And of course, Sarah, the wife, ends up hating Hagar, understandably. Yeah. And Hagar's like, lady, this was your idea. So I relate with all the parts of that story. But there's a point where Hagar was either sent away or she runs away. I can't remember the specifics. And she's just out there by herself.
Yeah. With her baby.
Mm-hmm. I'm caught up in this weird plan. And here I am just by myself. And she wasn't even a believer in the Hebrew God. She came from other faith or whatever system. And so she's out there in the wilderness and God appears to her and says, I'm the true God and it's going to be okay, basically, is what he says to her. And so she says, I have named him the God who sees me.
Yeah.
So, man, I remember reading that when I was probably a teenager. And I was like, you're the God who sees me.
Yeah.
You see me. Everybody feels unseen and overlooked. And I have a great life. I'm not, but even if you have the best life, there are moments where you're doing things that are hard and nobody gets it. Yeah. But to know that he's the God who sees me. Yeah. So I think it's the sense of truly being known. And when you feel loved like that, you can almost do anything.
Yes.
Because you're loved unconditionally. Mm-hmm. And so that is such integral part of the way that my soul is wired and, stitched up or whatever, that when people misrepresent that to me, I want to kick their ass. And that is just the truth. Right. I just get mad. I'm like, do not talk about my friend like that.
Right.
Because that is not the God who sees people. And so anyway, I get a little pissed about it, just like I would if someone said something about my daughter. Like, do you want to fight? I mean, that's and I think that's for those of us who have had those experiences and really have that love. Now listen, that makes me sound like I'm all in it all the time. Like tomorrow I might be like, God, do you even know who I am? Oh my God, I feel sick. Are you here? So it's not like I'm dwelling in this all the time, but at my root is that. And so when people mess with it, I get angry. Yeah. And so much so, I had a friend, has been a friend of ours forever. I won't call her out on the podcast because she may not want to be associated with this, but she said to me, this was so good. And this was like 15 years ago. And she's always had it. Do you know those people that really kind of they're so sweet and good, but they also have this sense of sort of where things are at spiritually for the times.
Sure.
They're kind of like in our tradition, you might call it like they have a prophetic gift, which is real weird. Yeah. And people used to associate that with like, oh, they can foresee the future. Well, that's really not true. I mean, like when you look at the word prophetic in the Bible, you look it up, it's really cool. It's like having a sense of what God is doing now and perhaps where he's headed. She said to me one time, she goes, and this was like 20 years ago. She said, man, I just feel like Christians, all of us, we just mess everything up so bad that I almost just wish there was a different name for being a believer, like, just children of God. And I was like, yes. And isn't that sad? Yeah. Because like you and I know lots of people listening, sometimes I don't want to be called a Christian. Yeah. And it's not because I don't love Jesus and I'm not proud to stand up for Jesus in America and call myself a Christian. That's not it. But the Jesus I know isn't like yours. Right. So do not put me in that box. Right. And do not put him in that box. And those are fighting words. So that's...
Well, it does beg the question. I mean, I think it begs two questions. One, this idea of how would you describe your Jesus, which is an important question, A, but the follow-up to that is, of course, why do you see that your Jesus that way? Why do you see Jesus in that light? Why is your Jesus obsessed with righteousness or grace or freedom or money or any of those things? Is your Jesus pretty much one-sided? So that's that question. Yeah. And then I think the really important question, which has kind of become our prayer, as we've already noted, which is, I don't need you to be who I want you to be. I need you to be who you are. Yes. So how can we get to the accurate picture of who Jesus really is, the accurate version of who he is?
Oh, that's good. I was thinking, just as you said that, it's,
Just pick it up from, that was a good question, Ant.
What's that?
Just pick it up from, and that was a good question.
Yeah.
Ant.
Okay. That was a good question. I think one way.
That is a good question.
Okay. That's a good question. And I think one of the ways we can know is if, when you love someone, it isn't all sunshine and rainbows and just, oh, it's great. You're the God who sees me and that's so awesome and you love me and I can go and punch people or whatever it is. Yeah. I mean, their love has requirements. If I'm going to stay married to you, and I'd like to, and we can talk about it after the show. But it requires some faithfulness and fidelity and me understanding who you are and taking a look inside myself when I do something wrong. And that's the same with, for us to say, I can hear some people like, oh, the grace Jesus, that's great. Well, yeah. But there are also times, because I know this love, that I know that I've handled something wrong because I have this presence and this friend that I rely on, or I know that I have to forgive someone. You feel that there's a closeness and that's what motivates you. Or I know there are some areas in my life where I have some behaviors that I need to shore up. And I don't feel judged by that. Sometimes I wish it weren't true, but it's sort of like same way, right? If we would say to Evangeline, listen, you cannot eat sugar all day long, which we have to say to her a lot. You're going to get diabetes diabetes and you're going to have it by 15.
Yeah.
You know, the culture is eating a lot of sugar.
But I love that answer, and I identify with it. It is so true. I think if you want to know who Jesus is, if you want to know who the real Jesus is, what his values are, then look at his teachings, look at his commands.
Yeah.
So
because there are some requirements.
Well, it's not just that. It just shows his values.
Yeah,
it shows what's important to him. He wouldn't ask us to do things if it was not important.
Yeah, definitely.
So the idea of saying, oh, this is who Jesus is. He is has absolute fidelity to the person of God. He is about him and in a way that is self-sacrificing. So to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, that's who Jesus is. He is absolutely compassionate and empathetic and merciful.
Yes.
He is absolutely intent on the discipline of forgiveness, the discipline of obedience, and why we do that. He's absolutely built on love because in his own words, the law and all the prophets hinge on this one command. That. Love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah. So if you're not loving people, you're doing it wrong.
Yes, exactly. So if you want to know who the authentic Jesus is, if you want to know what he's all about, if you want to try and connect with that person as authentically as possible, look at his commands and do those things. Yeah. And you will start to know this person.
Yeah. You can actually look at the Gospels. If you want to emulate somebody because you think they're really cool.
What you can't do is hold to one chapter. Right. I mean that sincerely.
Yeah, that's true.
You can't go to the place of turning over the tables and say, this is Jesus.
That's exactly. And we have our favorites we pick. Yeah.
We've used this illustration before, but I think it's accurate. The whole series of the gospel is a whole bunch of intimate experiences.
Yeah, stories.
This experience with, this woman at the well, this experience with the woman who's caught in adultery, this experience of the beggars, on and on and on and on. And to me, those are like dot to dots.
Yeah.
And when you draw a line between those dots, what you're left with is the picture of God's face. This is who God is.
Yeah.
This is what's important to God. This is how he wants to be seen as he sent his son Jesus to tell us and show us. So if you only take one of those dots,
right, you
are missing part of the composite. You are missing part of the picture. So when we isolate on one thing,
and
say
really
it's about
focus on
this,
that.
it's about this, it's about this.
If you took the account of Jesus turning over the tables at the tabernacle, so you've got your righteous indignation, Jesus,
right?
But you don't want to accept the fact that he said he who has not sinned throw the first stone, right. Or the gentle Jesus that forgave the woman at the well. If you only go with one and not the other, it's not a true depiction. Like if you had a rock star that you really wanted to emulate, like when you're a teenager, you're like, oh, I would super want to be like Bono or man, this guy's so cool or whatever. What would you do? You would read about him. Right. You would ask people about him. Yeah. And you would, aside from getting to meet him, which we would really like to have a beer with you, Bono, please.
If you're listening to this.
Irish whiskey, whatever, even water. Totally fine. But the point is, that's how, if you didn't get to sit down with that person, the way that you would learn is reading about or seeing or hearing about his interactions. Then you are able to put together this composite of who this person is. But if you're only focusing on one attribute because it suits your needs at the time or your political philosophy or what makes you feel safe or secure, I mean, it's not all evil, and we all do it at times. It's not a true picture of who that person is. Right. I mean, there are, you may be all grace Jesus and all that, and that's great. I love that. But he may also ask you to give your last 20 to somebody.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? So it's sort of like, oh, I like that part. I don't want to give any money.
You can be grace Jesus and then miss the part about, cutting your hand off if it leads you to sin or plucking your eye out. So there's there is a whole thing there. Yeah. And when we isolate one thing, we miss the rest of it. And then we misrepresent him in the process. And we also miss significant parts of our relationship with him in our lives when we don't, see the rest of the picture.
Yeah.
I do think that, in this whole conversation, there's also this assurance, as we've talked about so many times, that when you are looking for truth, the promise is you will find it. If you go into something with a sincere heart, with an open heart, and you're looking for truth, you find it. When you're only looking for, supporting evidence, then that's what you'll find too. But if you go looking for the truth, the scriptures say that's what you'll find. If you knock, the door is open. If you're searching, all those kind of, you call out.
Yeah.
So when we go into it and say, I don't need you to be the Jesus that I need you to be or want you to be, I need you to be you and help me to find you.
Yeah.
I think there's a safety in there that says, okay, I'll do that.
Yeah.
And there's a confidence in that relationship because Jesus loves us so much and because he does really want to be connected to us and he really does want to have this relationship with us and he's for us and not against us and all that, then he will meet us in that place. And that is our confidence.
Yeah.
And sometimes he'll meet us in that place through other people. Sometimes he'll meet us in the place through scripture or experiences or whatever. But when he does speak up, we can't tell him to shut up because it doesn't align with our picture of him.
Yeah,
too.
Exactly. And I think that place of confidence and the friendship that, like for me, I know he's the God who sees me and I feel unconditionally loved. So because of that, I'm not afraid to consider somebody else's perspective or someone else's way of life.
Right.
And I think about how much our beliefs have changed, especially over, I don't know, would you say 10 years?
Yeah, at least.
The core of that friendship is the same.
Yes.
But and separately and together, a lot of times you and I'll come to similar conclusions and we've been afraid to tell the other person, like, you know what I'm thinking? Then we'll say like, oh my God, me too.
Yeah.
But we've evolved or devolved in some people's opinion.
Right. Yeah.
Depending on those who are not listening to this podcast. But, it's that confidence of knowing. I mean, what do you suggest that people who are listening do? I mean, is it okay to say, that's not how I see Jesus, I love you?
Well, I don't know that we can convince.
Do we get to say anything? I want to say something.
I don't know that we can, we have found that people who don't want to find truth,
they're not going to ask us.
Truth.
That's right. It's a good point.
We don't spend a lot of energy there. And it's not necessarily on us to clean that up.
Yeah. We don't have to be God's PR agent, right?
I do feel like sometimes because Jesus gets misrepresented so much, I feel a certain want or responsibility to clean that up. But we clean that up through our own art. We're cleaning it up now.
Yeah.
I mean, that was not necessarily the intention of this podcast, but it is our way of saying it's not that, it's this.
Yeah.
And we choose to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So we have refused to give one group the voice on who Jesus is.
Yes.
We've refused to give one group or one personality type
or one political party
to say, this is who Jesus is and he's not yours.
Right.
And to take ownership of that. And so we have, in our small way, this is us cleaning some of that up or giving an alternate picture or at least saying, consider this instead.
Yeah, I have found him to be this way.
Right. Mm-hmm. And then at the bare minimum, it says there is more than one picture here. There's more than one opportunity here. So.
And even if no one were listening, and we hope you are, I mean, it's good for us to be able to talk about it.
Oh, absolutely.
And there are probably people in, any listeners' lives that they can have these conversations with. Yeah. I mean, I work things out. You're a thinker. I'm a talker. I do think, but I have to, a lot of times that's kind of how my mind works creatively is I have to talk through it.
Yeah.
And, find those people that, have an open heart and it's okay.
Yes.
I think to have those conversations, it's good. It's good for our heart and our mind to be able to be honest about it with each other.
So I think if you're listening audience, if you're taking, anything with you in some of this, I think one, it's asking yourself and trying to be as honest as you can, what your picture of Jesus looks like and then asking why. And then it's probably, going into that with a light heart, with a light grip and saying, okay, I want to find you as you are. And it might not all be revelatory and huge lightning bolts and all that kind of stuff. It might be gradual and it probably will be. But it is about saying, okay, would the real Jesus please stand up, and do your thing.
Stand up.
And so anyway,
That's good.
We're so grateful that we got to have this conversation with you, as always. And I really am thinking about several of you guys who have made comments or messaged us or sent us emails or found us face to face and all that stuff.
Very encouraging because we were afraid, man.
But it's nice to see your face in my mind as we have some of these conversations and imagine you chiming in and responding and having this conversation. So if you are enjoying this, we would love it if you guys would find a way to just share this. So there's probably somebody that comes to mind right now. You're thinking, gosh, so-and-so would probably really enjoy this conversation or, whatever. Well, hit that little share button, copy that link and text it to them and send it right now while you're thinking about it and send it to them.
What would be a cool thing to do?
What's that?
Well, it would be like, we're just talking about having these conversations on your own because it's so, therapeutic and good for your heart. What about the idea that you would send this episode or another episode that really spoke to you to a friend and then have a post-podcast party or just a conversation. Post-podcast together for a beer or coffee, be like, like a book club. I think we said.
Or a beer and say, God, what did you think about this?
The image of Jesus? What's your image of Jesus? And use it as a springboard to have your own conversation.
Yeah.
So I like the post-podcast party idea. There you go.
Do it. Tell us about it when you guys do it. And make sure you share this, and we appreciate it, and we will be back very soon.
Yes.
Peace out, friends.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with a friend. And check out Pioneer Dream's other podcast, Dreamers Live, a conversation about living intentionally, and Got a Minute, a podcast that pairs short humor columns with original music.